Today, cyber risks are becoming more numerous, more frequent, and constantly evolving. New threats pose serious questions about organizations' preparedness to recover from a breach. This brief outlines the importance of software assurance and user defined expectations. Also outlined are the security policies associated with software development lifecycle and supply chain vulnerabilities. Contemporary cybersecurity extends beyond protecting sensitive information and systems from malicious external attacks into guarding identities, data privacy, and vulnerability management and software security. I would like to start this presentation by defining what software assurance is. This is basically a set of activities for ensuring quality in software engineering processes by providing a baseline for secure software development and deployment. The definition of software assurance processes are activities that establish the levels in the software development lifecycle maturity model of deployment, from design specifications to the deployment in production environments, as well as checks and balances that adequate controls provide. Software is essential to the operation of the nation's critical infrastructure. Software vulnerabilities can jeopardize intellectual property, consumer trust, and business operations and services. In addition, a broad spectrum of critical applications and infrastructure, from process control systems to commercial application products, depend on secure, reliable software. Software assurance expectations are defined by the user. The user may also help identify the information management model that determines the access control and data storage requirements, which are determined by the customer's regulatory or internal compliance needs. The objectives of the software assurance are to document the processes and controls at every phase of the software development lifecycle with the intent to minimize the introduction of security flaws or software bugs that could be misused by the attacker. Software development cycle. This is basically the series of steps in the development of software from the planning stage till it reaches the end user. There are several phases depending on the methodology used. The current methodology deployed is Agile, which builds on the foundation of iterative development with the goal of minimizing failure rates by developing software in multiple iterations and small time frames while delivering fully functional components at each iteration. The security considerations in software development lifecycle are initiation, development and acquisition, implementation assessment, operation maintenance, and disposal. Initiation. This is the first phase of the development cycle. Security considerations are key to diligent and early integration, thereby ensuring that threats, requirements, and potential constraints in functionality and integration are considered. At this point, security is looked at more in terms of business risks with input from the Information Security Office. For example, a country may identify political risk resulting from a prominent website being modified or made unavailable during a critical business period, resulting in decreasing trust by citizens. Early planning and awareness will result in cost and time saving through proper risk management planning. Development and acquisition. Key activities in the development and acquisition phase include conducting risk assessments and using the results to supplement the baseline security controls, analyze security requirements, perform functional and security testing, prepare initial documents for software certification and accreditation, and design security architecture. Implementation and assessment. Implementation and assessment is the third phase of the security development lifecycle. During this phase, the software will be installed and evaluated in the organization's operational environment. Key security activities for this phase include integrating the software into its environment, planning and conducting system certification activities in synchronization with testing of security controls and completing software accreditation activities. Operations and maintenance. Operations and maintenance is the fourth phase of the development lifecycle. In this phase, the software is in place and operating. Enhancements and modifications to the software are developed and tested, and hardware is added or replaced. The software is monitored for continued performance in accordance with security requirements, and needed system modifications are incorporated. The operational system is periodically assessed to determine how the software can be made more effective, secure, and efficient. Operations continue as long as the software can be effectively adapted to respond to the organization's needs while maintaining an agreed upon risk level. Disposal. Usually, there is no definitive end to a software. Softwares normally evolve or transition to the next generation because of changing requirements or improvements in technology. System security plans should continually evolve with the software. Much of the environmental, management, and operational information should still be relevant and useful in developing the security plan for the follow-on software. Supply chain risks. Pinpointing and avoiding cyber-related supply chain risk is nearly impossible due to the complexity of global functioning supply chains. Supply chain attacks are becoming more prevalent in increased globalization of the software industry and by the higher prevalence of compromise of systems by intentional insertion of malicious code into software during development or maintenance. Software supply chain risks include software vulnerabilities, malicious code, and software that could not function as intended. The introduction of risks can occur at any point in the acquisition, and the causes may be due to coding and design defects that happen during the development, such as when unauthorized access to code execution, either intentional or unintentional. Inadequate access control to a product or service occurs between organizations during the supply chain transfer. Software supply chain risks also include third-party product tampering during development and delivery, and the compromise of software assurance by introducing software defects. The software suppliers and acquirer must share responsibilities for software assurance. This is an essential part of risk management, that the suppliers provide risk mitigation assurance, such as by providing a list of the use of all third-party libraries in the development of software to ensure they are not vulnerable. The supplier needs to go through the pre-qualification process that establishes separation of duties and that requires levels of access to corporate assets. Software vulnerabilities. Now, these are unintended flaws found in the software programs or operating systems. Vulnerabilities can be the result of improper computer or security configurations and programming errors. If left unaddressed, vulnerabilities create security holes that cyber criminals can exploit. Examples of these vulnerabilities are buffer overflow, which are among one of the most well-known common software vulnerabilities. Now, when you try to put something that's too big and something that's small, exactly that happens. The most popular web app like Java, these protect against this type of vulnerabilities. But mobile apps are written in C and C++ language family that is famously vulnerable to buffer overflows. Another one is the directory traversal. Now, this is also known as the path traversal. This type of vulnerability allows attackers to gain access to files and directories that are part of a website. Now, the attacker simply sends a file or directory request with a character sequence ... Now, this points to the parent directory. This vulnerability is especially treacherous with others, such as insecure storage of sensitive data. Failure to protect sensitive data. Now, this includes both data in storage and data in transit. SQL injection. In SQL injection, the attacker submits code as input in such a way that it executes against the database. SQLi is one of the most well-known and common software vulnerabilities, in part because it's so easy to understand and exploit. Researchers and attackers have been writing about this for over 2 decades, and yet it's still extremely common. Other types of code injections have also been proven to be persistent issues. Software options, operating system options. It's important to know what software options are available that can be advantageous to us in terms of functions. For operating system, we use the Linux Ubuntu, which is an open source software. This operating system is released in three editions: the core, the server, and the desktop. This operating system is popular for cloud computing. Another operating system used is the Mac OS Mojave by Apple. Evaluation of supply chain options. Every vendor in the supply chain should be on the same page. This means training on what's important for the organization. Assessment involves knowing the status of all vendors and departments within the link. After identifying the status of the supply chain, the weakest links are more visible. This can cause a decline in productivity if not taken care of. Cannot stress the importance of communication enough. Everyone in the supply chain must understand what, why, when, and who. There should be no surprises, and only join with vendors that are ready to partner. Explanation of costs involved. Analyzing current operations procedures and developing an overall supply chain strategy is a must in running a more efficient operation. Software service needs must be analyzed and demand strategy planning implemented. Linux is an open source software, hence no cost involved in obtaining and upgrading the software. Mac OS and Microsoft operating systems, on the other hand, are quite expensive, and they provide the necessary updates and patches. Recommendations for contract language. Contract is a legal obligation agreed upon by two parties partaking in the contract. Agreements don't necessarily have to be reduced to writing in order to constitute a binding contract. A contract is legally enforceable against both of the parties who made the agreement. However, a written contract is a more enforceable and reliable contract. It's always preferable from an administrative and management perspective, since the parties and their employees don't have to rely on their memories or secondhand information in order to find out what they're supposed to do or refrain from doing, rather than simply consult the document. If the contract was well written, it can reduce or eliminate contractual disputes. Clear, well drafted contracts make business matters much easier. Hence, it's important that everyone understands the contract and contract language, especially when dealing with vendors and supply chains. Today's increasingly complex software development environment requires more comprehensive security solutions. Organizations must introduce a more integrated approach to security and build protection into their software development cycle to be able to reduce risk and speed development. Embedding security testing into software development, both at the initial stage and throughout the cycle, reduces the risk of attacks. Finally, legal compliance on the part of all vendors and third parties can help standardize internal procedures and achieve significant savings and efficiency. Thank you.